So for those watching on YouTube, you missed a great discussion because I forgot to press record, but we're not going to go over it again because it wasn't that great. So this is the March special interest group for Consortia. So go ahead and we'll get back on topic. Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay. So the other question I had was, we have 12 different variations of rolling over from overdue to lost, which I gather is what Koha calls long overdue. And Koha only allows one variation. So
yeah, that's a tougher one. We just made all of our libraries agree that they were going to follow that same.
yes, because we range from 3 days to 2 months.
3 days to lost?
For laptops, specifically for laptops at
Oh.
one specific library.
Yeah, we have things that will go overdue that quickly, but then they're just overdue and they'll reach the maximum fine that quickly. So we have some items. We have an item type called key, because we have one of our libraries, they check out the key to the meeting room. The meeting room can be accessed from without going into the library. There's an external door. And so when somebody wants to use the meeting room when they're closed, they check out the key. And the key has a $300 replacement price because they figure that's what it'll cost to get somebody to drive all the way out there and put new locks in the building. And so, and the fine is $300 a day. So it reaches its maximum fine if it's overdue for more than a couple of days. But that doesn't go to a loss status. It just, puts that big fine on the account. But it doesn't actually go to a loss status. Because once things go to a loss status, then you get into the issues of having to deal with lost items. It's overdue. Our standard is that everything's overdue. Everything that's overdue after the first overdue notice goes out, that varies from library to library. But for all libraries, the second overdue notice goes out at 35 days. And the third overdue notice is called the loss notice, and that goes out at 45 days. And on day 46, they get billed for the replacement cost of the item. But in the case of that key, as soon as it's overdue, it hits the overdue fine. The late fee is as big as the replacement cost of the item. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
I wonder if you could use like the automatic item modification by age tool for this. I think because it does, I was looking at it, it does let you choose like the date that it's using, could be the item lost on date. So if it's lost at 3 days and then you want to change the status from one lost status to another, you could set like, say that after 5 days it goes into another lost status and loops around. I don't know. I assume you can add like branch conditions because it does have all the item fields available. So you could say that branch A at 42 days overdue or 42 days after it was marked lost, it gets a new lost status, that sort of thing.
And what is that one called?
It's in the cataloging tools. It's called automatic item modifications by age.
Automatic.
And I guess I do have one. I have them set up for like not for loan. I have one called the cherry bell rule because they never take things out of in processing. So that branch automatically we take the not for loan status off of their items after so long. So you could limit it by branch. I think the tricky part would be nailing down that date it's using for the age.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. Thanks.
Anything else? When are you going to go live on Koha? When is that coming up?
June 17th.
Oh, you got a long time.
Yeah, it's just that we have 59 libraries, so it's just a
Yeah.
huge amount of work, and I'm trying to get to everything as early as possible, so I'm not freaked out the last week of we're going live.
Anybody else dealing with any weird issues? I see Miranda joined us. Hi, Miranda from Ocean State. No camera or mic. Okay. Has anybody come up with an idea for their great koha-US presentation at the conference this year in Texas? So I noticed Bob sent out an email saying, hey, everybody, remember that's we need those presentation proposals. Around here,
a project. So next conference, I'll have something to present. This conference, I'm still learning everything that can go wrong and how to fix it.
yeah. Everything I've been doing has been dealing with stuff that I learned at the Aspen conference that we should probably take care of before we migrate to, before we start using Aspen. So I've been told repeatedly that Aspen has a way of showing off all of your bad cataloging choices made over the past years and years. So we've got 16 years of bad cataloging that will be all on display soon.
Do you have a list of those bad cataloging choices so that those of us who haven't gotten to that point but could be fixing them?
Mostly it deals
Like
with
not
mostly it has to do with the fact of having, for the sake of people that weren't trained very well at catalogers, as catalogers,
Yeah.
for our smaller libraries where there's not a lot of, where there's just a lot of, you know, the director has like essentially every job at the library.
Yeah.
And they don't have specialized catalogers. There was an attitude towards, well, we don't need to worry about any of the control fields because we don't use those, because they aren't necessary for the Koha OPAC. But they are helpful for the Aspen OPAC. So
Okay. So the leader and the 008 are
yeah,
controlling. Okay. They're starting to control stuff in Koha.
yeah,
Especially that 008. We learned the hard way. If that is not there, it messes with your search results. Koha doesn't always know that it exists. So it'll put it like at the very end.
well, we have all of our records have the 008. It's just most of them say that all of our items are books, whether they're books or not. They're all, the 008 was hard coded into the default framework.
Yeah.
And nobody was ever, and everybody was told, just ignore those. They're not important. So, oh, Michelle put her head on her hands on her head, and
She's clutching her pearls.
Yes,
Yeah.
if I had pearls. I don't have pearls.
yeah, I would never say that to Heather. That's, you know, we'd have to call an ambulance in San Francisco to go rescue Heather if I said something like that to her. But yeah, there's 0000007 and 008 are all messed up on tons of our stuff. So there was a push too for a long time to just say, you know, it's easier for patrons if every different manifestation of Great Expectations is just on one record. So when you place a hold on, because patrons don't care which one they get. So why differentiate them? Because that just confuses them when they look up grade expectations and there's 8 different
Mhm.
bib records. That's confusing for patrons to just put them all
Yeah.
on one record. There's a lot of that too. So Miranda is saying that she'd like to do a presentation on, we started loading authorities and it worked, but she's only half hopeful it'll be done by the time. Something we found out, if you change the 008 format type without changing the leader, it won't stick.
Yeah, the leader controls the 008. So that whole project that I did at
Yeah.
last year's conference, that's what I did. MARCEdit becomes your friend. The deal
Yeah.
is the item record has to be correct so that you can export the records correctly. Because we had where the item type said it was a book, but it wasn't a book.
Right.
It was actually a CD-ROM or a Kindle or so the time-consuming process was, okay, this looks wrong. The record sounds like it's an online, but people were bad about not deleting fields from Z3950s. So I couldn't tell, okay, did you inherit this data and you just didn't delete it because you didn't know you were supposed to? Or is your item type actually wrong and your bib record correct? So the hard part and time consuming was like getting with people. And I still have like 2 or 3 libraries that the librarians are only there a couple of hours a week.
Yeah.
And they have so much other stuff to do. So like getting that answers is just, I'm like, yeah, I have a note. We'll eventually get those fixed, but they have to tell you the real item type before you can fix
Right.
the other stuff.
There are a lot of opportunities for mistakes.
Mm.
So there was in the Google Drive for this group, or if I can find it again, Consortia. And I don't know who wrote this, but it's a report to find when the collection code is blue. I'm not 100% sure what it's doing. It wouldn't work in our system, but I'll put it in the chat box here for everybody to look at. But it's trying to determine when the collection code and the item type, it looks like, when they don't match.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's yours. Okay.
We have a lot of that stuff where we try to find mismatches of I actually have a report called bad cataloging and it's just a big nasty list of like comparing shelf locations to collection codes to see if they match. So like, is there a juvenile book in the adult collection and that sort of thing?
Yeah, for us, I'm relying a lot on call numbers to find the weird stuff. But we have a lot of mismatches between the 942 shelving location and the 952 shelving locations and the 942 item type. The bib item type and the item types aren't even close, and they all differ from position 6 and the 008 or the 000. So there's a lot of this bad stuff going on, and that might be what I get out of this most is better reports for how to identify things that are wrong. But those reports are going to be, like this wouldn't work on our system because we don't have a collection code called blue or DVD. We have those exact collection codes. They just have different codes essentially. So Yeah, and Miranda says Aspen identifies your bad cataloging very loudly. And that's what I'm afraid of. So I'm trying to do some basic cleanup before we start using Aspen. So
I do have a question about kind of circulation rules in collection codes. Is like when we first migrated, we were told to get your item types as few as possible, like as get them down. So we're trying to do that, and so we expanded the collection codes. But the collection codes have an effect on patrons and how they can place holds and whether something can be placed on hold or not. So now that we were trying to get the item types down, now the collection codes are up, and we're in the same exact position where they're expanding because every library wants to do something different with the same collection code, and each collection code has to do something on its own in Aspen side. So it's really affecting library of things, where like one library would want to make it requestable and another library doesn't. And if it's like a telescope, and so now it's a library, is it the collection code is telescope, the item type is now like item 3-day non-renewable or whatever. But that affects Aspen because if they use the collection code telescope either has to be holdable or not holdable. So we're in the same position of things are the same item type or the same collection code has to do one thing and one thing only, and the libraries want to do multiple things. So how to make it do multiple things.
Michelle, I'm confused, but it might be because you're configured differently than we are. How are you using collection code as a functional thing? Is it in Aspen?
Yeah.
Or Koha? Okay. Oh, so you're using collection code to do format?
Yeah, to display the format depending on what it is. So with books,
Oh.
but with library of things, we had an item type that was like equipment 3 days, equipment 14 days, library of thing 3 days, library of thing 14. It's the same exact loan rule. So we want it to just be item, and then they can choose the collection code to make it display differently. So Cal was able to put all of our collection codes into the item type mapping table, so they actually do say whether they're holdable or not. But again, it puts us in the same position that we're in Koha, where item types are holdable or not. But now collection codes are now holdable or not. So it's a mess. We thought I was going to fix it because item types are really there to determine the circ rule. So that makes it harder to display to patrons.
I have really big surprise, probably stink face, because of course Cal set us up like 2 months after you. We're item type on both ends. So we're using item type, and we have the same issue as you: book 7, book 21, DVD 7, DVD 21, book express 7, all that stuff. And we just have all of those grouped together into formats in Aspen so that it's circ rule to circ rule. So I'm kind of dumbfounded that you're set up with collection code by Bywater, unless there's unless there was some weird reason that makes you different in a way.
We just started doing the collection codes like a few months ago because we're seeing that like the equipment library of things, it's all the same loan like circulation rules. So why do we have so many item types that are saying the same exact thing if it's just an item? So like ephemera
But
or
you can
whatever.
group them all together in Aspen the same way you're doing with your collection code. So Aspen for us only says book, but book is book 7, book 21, book, like it's a million different item types.
But like for now that we have the collection code in there, because we wanted to get the item types down to just say item instead of equipment and stuff, but then display to patrons that say, this is a thing, this is a puzzle, you know, but it's still just an item type. So it like, that's how we identify it now, is it's just an item that checks out for 7 days. But because you use the collection code, the patron sees that it's actually a puzzle. So they can share
Right.
the same item types, but it displays better for the patrons. But in Aspen,
Okay.
because each line has to say whether it's holdable or not, and whether the pickup location is the library pickup or home pickup or no pickup at all, that is now, it's either that the collection code is now either holdable or not. So libraries that want to, one library wants to do puzzle as holdable, but another library doesn't. Now I'm in the same position again because the collection code either has to be holdable or not. So yeah, it's, but needless to say, just that we're meeting with Cal again, and we're going to be reconfiguring pretty much everything all over again. So just FYI for everybody else that's recently joining, and you're gonna try it out for, like, we've been on a year now, and now I understand how we need to reconfigure everything. It's like a massive now new project.
Interesting. Some more, hello, Renee. The meeting is being
Hi.
taken over by Ocean State Library. Anything else going on?
I had a list, but I don't know where it's at.
Oh,
I think one of them was like, do you guys have any strategies for training people on reports? And not like, how do you write reports, but like fun ways to teach them using reports and that sort of thing. Have you done any sort of trainings on that? Oh.
I'm doing Q&As where it's kind of drop in and bring whatever questions you want. And we've got a channel in our intranet where they can post questions. And it usually it's kind of like it sits dormant for a while. And then somebody asks an interesting question, and there's a brief flurry of activity and a little bit of fun, and then it'll get quiet again for a while. Right now it's quiet. We haven't had anybody jump in a while, but usually all it takes is somebody to jump in with a neat question, and then we dive in, and we allow everybody to run reports, which is exciting. But that's us. Unless Miranda or Renee has other experiences too.
we allow virtually anybody to run reports, but there's only a couple of people that can write reports. And that's the primary reason for that, is because we had this report bloat where we had, when I started working here 8 years ago, we had over 2,700 reports, and they were impossible to identify what they did without running them. And a lot of them didn't work, and it was because everybody that wanted to could go in and write one. And the reason that they all got turned off was partly that, and partly because somebody wrote a report that was like trying to grab every item on every biblio at once and then do something else to it. It was like every item, every biblio, and every patron in one report. And they ran this at like 4:30 in the afternoon on the Friday before Labor Day. And And I was on the phone with Larry from Bywater Solutions until like 8 o'clock that night trying to figure out what had happened because it crashed the whole system really badly. And so after that, nobody is allowed to write reports.
I haven't crashed the system yet. The lights might have dimmed at Bywater's headquarters.
Larry actually created some, built in some things into the system to make it so that if a report runs for more than a certain length of time, it will just time out and the report will fail.
I've been
So-
trying, you know, if you don't mind a little sidetrack on that rabbit hole, the default is 300 seconds. That's a 5-minute report. And I mean, maybe for one of us in this room, that's reasonable for something that's really over the top every once in a while. But for the average person, a default of 5 minutes seems like madness. And I was trying to talk to systems. I'm like, could we have it when you create a new report that the default when you create a new report is more like 60 seconds? Because if they're writing something that takes longer than that, I mean, honestly, 30 seconds or less. Because if they're writing something that's taking longer than that, I want to talk to them. I want to find out what they're trying to do. I want to help them with it and make sure that, you know, what you just described doesn't happen. Or if it does, that I'm responsible for it, you know.
Yeah, when I started here, there were several reports that were labeled as, you know, only run after 5 p.m. But I think I've cleaned out most of those. So
We use a libguide to, you know, kind of, I guess, external to keep track of the good ones. So, and that's kind of what we promote to people. And we use the embed code for that box in the libguide and embedded it in the reports page in the footer so that it's kind of right there.
right.
And so far, so good. I don't think I've gotten a lot of screams lately about reports. There was a flurry recently, a weeding, which for us is very custom from one building to the next. But yeah, I don't know if Miranda or Renee hears things differently. But
This could
My
easily
question-
become. Oh
Oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
No,
No,
go ahead,
my
James.
question was self-serving because I have a users group next week and I decided I was going to teach them some things about reports and then I was like, I don't really know what I want to talk about. But we're going to do like, I think I called it info for infographics. So we're going to focus on reports they can run to fill out infographics and then some strategies for like working with the data in spreadsheets. So we don't let anybody write reports. So if the system crashes, we know it's my fault.
Well, I said there are a handful of people that can write reports, but I'm really the only one that does. So
Yeah, it's also my fault that we have like, we're coming up on 900 again. I really need to go through and delete some because it really slows down that page loading, like the page
Yeah.
of reports if you've got a lot. So I think I'm just gonna back up anything that's not been run for a while and wipe it out.
that was my number one challenge in getting rid of old reports is I would look at something and I would go, well, nobody's run this in 4 years. And I would look at it and I would go, I don't even understand what this is trying to capture. And then I would delete it. And then a week later, somebody would call and they would say, somebody deleted the report. I can't find the report that Liz wrote me 8 years ago that I need to run when there's 2 full moons in July in an odd numbered year. And that'd be the one that I deleted, you know, and so I came up with a system for backing them up. I guess I have 865 reports right now, and there's probably about 2 or 3.
you know, that's a good point. I wonder if we ought not to like have some sort of a, you know, if you, I don't want to use a year because there are some things you run once a year for stats, but maybe something like 14 months if a report hasn't been run in 14 months, it's on the chopping block, or at least it's going to get looked at or something, downloaded and archived and whatever. Might be a good idea. Yeah, and we had Bywater preload a bunch of stuff for us that I don't know that we're using any of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of oh, that's Michelle right there. So bunch of preloaded reports that don't work. Yeah. I use a lot of custom stuff in our reports so that they won't work anywhere but us, but here, because I use lots of, I create authorized values tables that can group things together for us that don't really work in other places.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. I'm always struggling with that.
With what?
Well, it's like the lack of the ability like to create a set and then work with that set with Bywater data, but an authorized values table that's just for the purpose of running against some reports would actually be a really fantastic solution.
Yeah, I do that a lot. My goal, I've been recoding all of our item types over the last couple of years. I'll get to a few every now and then. It's a lot of work, but I want to get to the point where all of my item types that are related to print materials start with the letter P, and all of my non-print item types start with the letter N. And then that way I can just run a report and use an authorized values table that's N wildcard and put that in an authorized value and say, show me all the non-print items. And
There is the item
that'll be on
type
the drop down.
categories thing, which doesn't do anything yet, but it's already there.
Yeah.
We're looking at that right now, thinking we might use it just to group things for, just let the database group them for us when we need to report on it, even though it doesn't really do anything in Koha yet.
Right. Yeah, I started working on this 5 years ago, so that wasn't an option 5 years ago. And Miranda says, sometimes I copy a report and paste it into MySQL to run it because it's easier to play around with it. I do that too. I have an ODBC connection and I have a bunch of tools that I can use to write reports without writing reports.
I mean, sometimes we get some pushback on that ODBC connection every once in a while. And I'm like, there are some reports I don't want in front of our members. There are reports that I don't want them to be able to run because A, it might take the server down at high noon, or B, it's got a little bit too much information in it or something like that. So
I've never had any
it's
pushback,
useful.
so.
You're a much bigger wig than I am.
Well, I've also, that was something I wanted when we migrated to when I first migrated to Koha in 2012.
Yeah.
And I think
Me
they
too.
trust me. Any other report things going on? We
Anybody
mentioned.
see Andrew's crazy report?
Was
He
it in
just
the?
posts. I don't know. It took him 17 chats to post it in. I think it's in the not the Bywater one, but the other one, I think.
Community Slack?
Yeah, I think he's in the community Slack. He's using the Texas weeding
Oh, actually, I did
thing.
see part of that today. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of want to look at that, especially given that like weeding seems to be like the the Wild West. And I mean, maybe that's appropriate, but it makes it more challenging for us to help our libraries because there is no standard report because everybody wants it a little bit different, you know, and it's difficult to serve them when everybody wants it, you know, a little different
That's
criteria.
that's the report that I have. That's the whenever anybody calls and asks and says, I need a report for weeding, I just say 2731. You want report 2731. And
Oh,
I can show you what it looks like.
yeah.
These are all the reports that it replaced. So it allows the library, just a shelf list is what it creates, and it allows the libraries to select which branch they're at. And then they can choose all shelving locations, or they could specify which shelving location they want to work at. And we only have three. Effectively, we only have three. We have adult, youth, and adult, young adult, and children's. But then it also gives them all item types or one item type or all collection codes. And I've got a box here where they could do, if they wanted to, a left anchor call number search. They can
How are you
include,
doing the auto insert? Is that just a jQuery
that's
to,
some jQuery, yeah. I have a piece of jQuery that if it anytime a label on this page ends with or a percent symbol, it sticks a percent symbol in there.
and
Anytime
oh god.
anytime it says added between date 1, it puts in January 1st, 2000. And anytime it says and
Oh,
date 2, it puts in today's date. And so they can limit by item added between these two dates, or item last borrowed between these two dates, or item last seen between these two dates. And then with X or fewer checkouts, they can decide if they want to show all items or only show display checked out items, show all, no or yes, and lost
so is
missing.
that well, I'd love to, because we're not JavaScript aficionados over
Oh
here.
yeah,
I'd love to see your jQuery on the dates if you wouldn't mind adding that to the Google Doc. And B, with X or fewer checkouts, is that one of your authorized values
yes.
hacks? Oh,
So
very
I've just
cool.
got in my authorized values, one of these. Somewhere down in here I guess if I looked at the report, I could tell which one I need. The report is kind of a long one. It's like well, it's almost 300 lines. So all I have is just an authorized values table. It's just got all these different entries in it. Authorized values 1, 2, 3, 4. I think up to at a certain point.
Mhm.
I guess starting at 35, I just go by fives all the way up to 999. So, but there's once you start screwing around with those different authorized values, you can come up with all kinds of ways to use them. I've got a whole bunch.
Why did you use authorized values as opposed to having the person just type a number in?
Because my experience has always been that if there's an authorized values there, if the top one is percent symbol, which is all, it's a wild card. then the default is all.
Mhm.
But if you rely on the staff member to put a value in there, if you've got a whole bunch of different values in there, they're going to forget one. And then they're going to phone in and they're going to say, this report doesn't work. And then you say, well, let's walk through this and figure out where it didn't work. Where was the failure? And the failure was usually that they didn't read the instructions and put values in all the spaces that needed values. A lot of times, my experience is that staff will think, if I leave this blank, it's going to give me everything. When the actual reality is, if you leave it blank, you get nothing.
Right.
So I had to come up with some different ways to that's one of the things that I tried really hard with that report, was to make it so that there was zero chances for them to not fill in something. And that was, when the reports that had simple, when I started here, there was a report just called Super Weeder, and it required that people put in dates for date added and, items added between these two dates. And people would send me an email and they would say, which report do I run to help me with this kind of weeding? And there were like 5 or 6 different super weeder reports, because one of them was based on, one of them was hard coded for a dropdown for collection code. One of them was hard coded for a dropdown location. And so none of them had all those different options, because at the time that report was written, there wasn't a way to put a wildcard into a dropdown without creating a list of authorized values that included a wildcard. Now you can use
Right.
the colon all to create a wildcard at the top of the list in a dropdown. But that didn't come in until, I want to say, 2019. That wasn't an option. And so invariably what would happen is, if you had so you couldn't do a super weeder report that had item type and collection code, because you would only be getting one item type and one collection code in that item type, or one location in that. If you added in a location, you would get adult, book, picture book, and you would have to have all 3 variables, all 3 of those in there. And so we had a bunch of different reports. We had one by location, one by item type, one by collection code. And there were like 6 or 7 of these different things. But by doing the different authorized values, I could turn all of those into one report. And then instead of 3,000 reports, I had 296 or 2,996. So, it was a way of getting rid of a bunch of old reports. So, and I know that Christopher and I did a video on that a long time ago. So I'll dig out the links to that video series, because it was one of those videos that we did where it was like a 6 weeks of, this video we showed how to do this thing, and this video we showed how to do another thing, and then by the end of it we had all the pieces there to build
nice.
the whole report. So, but that's one thing I would recommend if you're working with Consortia, is figure out ways to make those reports so that you can, instead of that's the reason we had 3,000 reports, is because we were writing separate reports for each branch. And by using authorized values to create different dropdowns, we were able to write one report that could be used by all 50 branches, instead of 50 reports that could only be used at one branch.
Very cool.
And the jQuery helped there too, to pre-fill a lot of those values. So.
Yeah, we've got this report on our system, and we really like it because you can just pull it up and run it and get a list. I mean, because all those things are already pre-filled, so it's really simple. And then George had a nifty spreadsheet that went along with it, so I just put that in my Google Drive, and there's a link to that in my notes for that report, so people can take that and like evaluate the data from the shelf list report
Cool.
easily.
I don't remember writing a spreadsheet. Did you write a spreadsheet or?
No, it's yours. I can show you what it looks like.
I wonder, I mean, there's still, there's always going to be somebody who wants something special. Would it be possible for like for example, the dates, like instead of hard coding that, could you have it set by, say, a URL variable? So have, a from to or from date to date as in the query string of the URL, and have JavaScript kind of grab it out of there and stuff it in, and that way somebody could bookmark the query but hard code in the dates they want in it, or more likely we would, here's the query with the dates that you want in it that are different from everyone else's dates, no problem, kind of thing.
There's probably a way to do that. I would have to think it through.
Yeah,
I don't like
that's
doing that much work for him.
that's my plan for my overdue thing, because I made that big overdue report that runs through a template. So I want to hard code. I want to pull today's date and run that through the URL, attach it to a link that they just press, so they don't have to go digging for it. It's just a link that says print today's overdues, and it takes them directly to that template run for today's report.
Yeah,
But I haven't
it's
gotten there
also
yet.
because we don't have JavaScript on it in-house, so being able to not have to go into that crazy file in the back end and find it and edit it, to be able to just stuff it in the URL where we link to the report in our libguide would be save us some grief, I think. So help our members, but mostly do it to help us.
Yeah, I think the tricky part would be like if it's a moving target or not. Like if you want today, then you're gonna have to use some sort of code to pull out today and then insert it into the URL.
One thing I would say for anybody that's new to Koha and you're thinking about writing jQuery or JavaScript is be sure to add comments on everything so you know what each piece does.
I get jQuery amnesia all the time.
Yeah,
So I have to comment everything. Like from day to day, I'll be like, what the heck was I doing with
yeah,
that?
you work on something on Monday and then something happens, you don't work on it again until Thursday. It's like, wow, what the hell did I do there? You gotta spend forever picking it apart to figure out what's going on. So well, we've only got 5 minutes left. Is there anything else that we didn't really talk about any bugs related to Consortia today? So message. It's my phone going off. I have a sick kid at home,
Oh.
which it's not as bad as it could be. I mean, she's 25. But she's texting me wondering if I'm coming home for lunch now. So maybe we should call it good. It was good to see everybody. I think of all the things that we've talked about today, everybody being sure to write a proposal for your presentation at the koha-US conference this year is the most important thing. And I think Jason should show off his new report thing with the templates and the report notice template.
When are the proposals due?
I don't know,
I think it's
like a
Tuesday.
week
I
ago,
got
probably.
time. I got time. I'll put it in.
When do they do?
It's April 2nd.
Oh, there's lots of time.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll put in a proposal. My problem is I scheduled the migration like 2 go lives that week and didn't even think about looking at my own calendar when I was scheduling them. So I'm gonna be a mess at the conference. But I do plan on being there.
Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to click the end button and stop the recording. So we'll see y'all later.